Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Podcast Daily and a happy hump day from Berm and me, Austin Ward. We are back again, and I knew that I would find something to talk about, and I can't spoil it. Berm doesn't want to know. He wanted to come in fresh. But what if I told you that anonymous coaches talk to Athlon Sports
Love that.
about teams in the Big Ten? What if I told you that?
I would say that is the best way to make up content in June, is to make up quotes from people. Because the thing that I actually find most hilarious about any like anonymous coach sources stories is that, and maybe our sample size is small, maybe my sample size is smaller than yours. I talk to a lot of coaches, but specifically from one school. None of them ever speak in full sentences. So like, I don't know how you get full paragraphs using coach like anonymity, because they don't talk that way. And they certainly don't be like, I was sitting here the other day just thinking about that particular topic, and I decided that I really do think that they have the potential to be very good, but I do worry that the coaching staff is just not trying hard enough. Like, I'm like, these things are just so made up whole cloth, you can tell.
They are generally pretty fake. I have had to do them before. The most success that I ever had was like if you had one coach who had prepared for a game and played against that opponent, and you're trying to get some background on X's and O's, you get some really good insight. Whether they won the game or they lost the game, doesn't matter. They prepared for them. They immersed themselves in that team for a week, but you still don't wind up with paragraphs and complete thoughts and like eloquent responses. So when I read something like this, which is positive about Ohio State, spoiler alert, if you thought you were going to get
weirder.
Yeah, if you thought you were going to get something negative about the Buckeyes, that's not what this is. But an anonymous Big Ten coach told Athlon Sports this, Berm. Quote, "This is the only roster in the league that could have beat Georgia last year. The talent they have matches the SEC at every position group, year in and year out. The perspective is the problem, because if you lose to Michigan, the season is a bust. The program is in great hands, and Ryan Day is a top-tier head coach. It's just the standard is what it is."
I mean, all that's fine and good, and I kind of agree with it, but I don't know that anyone actually said it. It sounds like an AI response. It sounds like if you asked ChatGPT to give you an anonymous thought on Ohio State football, that's what it would be. And I agree with it all. I mean, I've been obviously very bullish on Ryan Day as the head coach. I continue to be. I think that the program, from a perspective of perspective, it is a little bit funky right now, a little wonky, because they were a field goal away from winning the national championship a year ago. But I don't know that a lot of the fan base would have been happy because they lost to Michigan. If Alabama, loses to Georgia and wins the national championship, people don't care. If Georgia loses to Alabama and then wins the national championship, people don't care. I think the biggest hurdle for Ohio State in the last 20 years has been, in my opinion, that because the rest of the Big Ten has been so bad, that if the Buckeyes didn't beat Michigan, they weren't going to have a chance to play for the national championship. And I think that as long as Michigan continues to elevate itself and puts the league in a better position from a national standpoint, that you can maybe, and then obviously you throw in the playoff and the chance that these teams are going to play back-to-back weeks and could play 3 times in a season, et cetera. Like, that one game is going to start to lose some significance. But bottom line, like, I don't think there's any coach in the league that isn't like a straight up hater who's going to say anything different about Ohio State.
Yeah, I wonder, and a lot of these anonymous stories and the anonymous polls, Ryan Day comes in with a pretty high approval rating amongst his peers. And maybe the only place where there are marks against him, which is understandable, is the record against Michigan. And certainly within the fan base and being closer to it and covering the team, like, that's all amplified in Columbus. But like, the perception, since that was the word that was used here from this anonymous coach who's definitely real, like, around the rest of the league and the country, Ryan Day is extremely well thought of. And I think he's given a little bit more rope for being in year 5 as a head coach, given how difficult the job is at Ohio State, than he might be given from the fan base itself.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And he knew that, though. I mean, if you remember his press conference on December 4th, 2018, he said, my expectation here is to beat Michigan and win every other game. And I think there is a not insignificant portion of the fan base that has forgotten that he actually did beat Michigan his first year and was on his way to running them out of the horseshoe in 2020 when that game got canceled. And whatever happened after that, I think you can't like gloss over. It is important to recognize that Michigan righted their ship and figured out a way to beat Ryan Day and beat Ohio State. And some of that might be because they've just been borrowing NFL defensive coordinators, and John Harbaugh is basically coaching, with Jim and figuring out a Harbaugh family, attack plan. But overall, the fact is the big picture hasn't changed. And that is that Ryan Day is 44 years old and is in his 5th year ever as a head coach. And so if you put that up against some of the all-time greats, so look at his record over his first 4 years of his head coaching career, it is better than I'd imagine pretty much anybody in history. So I don't know, where he can possibly go that fans will be happy about, but I also understand that he understands the microcosm that he's the microscope that he's in Columbus.
Well, the part of that quote that is, a lot of people are not going to like this, but he's saying if you don't beat Michigan, the season is a bust. Well, that's not true anymore.
Yeah.
And it's never going to be true again. People can feel how, and I'm not telling anyone how they want to feel. If the rivalry is the most important thing in the world to you, I understand. I won't try and change your mind. I know for a fact that I have friends who ask and they say, well, if he loses a third straight game to Michigan, is he on the hot seat? Is he going to get fired? And I would say, you may want him to be, but the reality is that he will not be, especially if he wins all the other games on the schedule and gets back the same way. Like, well, if he does the same thing as last year, is he going to get fired? No, he was a field goal away from potentially winning the national championship. The stakes for the rivalry game are not the same as they were in 1972 or 1982 or 1992 or 2002. And that's never coming back. That's unfortunate. But this also goes back to what we talked about on Monday at Roosters with his comments to Chris Holtmann. You don't have to put every single ounce of your program and all of your sanity into one day anymore. And that sucks. I don't like having to say that. And people are going to get really mad that is what I'm saying. And that's how I view this as the reality moving forward, that you should always care about 364 days to be ready for the game. That's cool. That is how it's always been, but it won't get you into the playoff. It may not even matter to win the Big Ten starting next year when you start removing divisions and you play extra conference games and whatever else. You may have to play them 2 or 3 times. So getting ready for just the one that's in the big house or the horseshoe may not be in your best interest either. I know that all that sounds crazy, and some people are going to hate that I'm saying it, but that is what is happening to college football.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the gamesmanship of college football changes over the next couple of years. If you think back to the Cincinnati Bengals and Baltimore Ravens in Week 17 of the NFL season this past year, Baltimore they knew they were in the playoffs. They knew the Bengals were going to be in the playoffs. They knew they were going to play the next week if they lost, and so didn't play anybody and said, "Hey, let's just see if we can completely throw off the game plan." And I don't think that anyone wants to consider that that's the future of college football in some ways, but that is how it's going to be. You're going to see guys who have to make decisions about, hey, do I want to really show everything we can do this week when we can play this team again in 2 weeks? And I think that it's hard because for people who grew up here in Ohio or here in Michigan, everything you are in life has been defined by this rivalry and who wins that game. It's not like you have bragging rights for that weekend. It is a life-altering experience for the next 365 days until you get a chance to redo it. And the perception of the game losing its value is going to happen slowly but surely, and it's going to be terrible for people. And I don't think that folks are going to be ready to readjust their expectations or their hype for that game in short order. I think that's going to take a couple of years to happen. And when it does, I hope that Ryan Day is the head coach for Ohio State to do that, because I think he's the right head coach to lead the Buckeyes for the next 10 years if he wants to. And I do understand the fan base that says, hey, if you can't beat Michigan, you can't be the coach here. But Again, Kirby Smart lost to Alabama the first 3 times he played them, and then now all of a sudden Georgia has everything they want. And I think you have to be willing to be patient as long as you see the rest of the program is in a good position and good shape. And that's the point of this quote. Like, people need to allow this program to flourish under Ryan Day, because that's what it is doing. And you could short circuit it if your only focus is Michigan.
Yeah. The other part you mentioned there with Georgia and Alabama, we've already, to some extent, now it didn't look like this maybe necessarily going into the game, but when they played in the SEC championship game, and it was like 2 years ago, and Georgia didn't seem to really care that all and kind of got blown off the field in the second half. Like, what incentive did they have to really win? Like, they were trying to win a national championship, not the SEC championship. Then they got another chance a month later and won the game that mattered more. Like, that's how do you decide?
Yeah, and it is just going to be a thing that coaches are going to have to deal with that you never had to think about in college football. But we're entering this weird space that I don't think you can really objectively look ahead and say, well, this is how it's going to be. I mean, you saw the report on, I'm sure you saw the report on Tuesday that the former founder of the USFL wants to have a spring high school season for high school players, a 10-game season in cities around the country. Like, what are we doing here? Like, this is, you're going to pay kids in high school to come play football in the spring when they, like, are their college coaches going to be okay with this? Or like, what? So you're just creating another league. Like, the game, the rapid transition that the sport is going through requires you to figure out what's really important. And I guess that's sort of the question that I've had for Ohio State fans for a couple of years now is, what's really important? Is it winning the national championship, or is it winning the Big Ten? And we know a decade ago when Jim Tressel was leaving Ohio State, the goal was win the Big Ten, and then, if anything else comes, that comes. But that was before the playoff, and now you can directly play yourself into a chance to win a national championship. And so it will require you to adjust. And I think that's where a coach like Ryan Day, coming from the NFL, spending time there, understanding how to prepare for a little bit different calendar is an advantage for Ohio State.
Would you like to hear another totally real anonymous quote?
Yes. Hold on. Is it about Ohio State, or is it about someone else in the league?
It's about somebody else.
Okay, let's hear it. And then I want one about Northwestern.
Of course, that's what the show is all about.
Yeah.
The great division rivalry with
Fighting
Ohio State
Fitzgeralds.
Last season really sealed it for them. This is a different program. The gap between them and Ohio State hasn't been this close in decades. It's reload, not rebuild, which is something they've been able to claim like Ohio State or an SEC team. The transfers are good. The backfield is great. The QB is great. They've got speed on the edges, and defensively, they are consistent and smart.
Penn State or Michigan?
That was Michigan.
Okay. I'm not going to go on the JJ McCarthy is great train. I guess I'll start there. He's certainly serviceable and good enough to win and good enough to beat Ohio State, as he showed last year. If you give him time to throw and don't cover anybody, that generally makes it easier. But
wow, only that?
Yeah, I mean, those are two things you really need. If you have time to throw and nobody's covering anyone, any quarterback should be able to hit receivers. I think that there's some truth to the fact that the gap is closer than it's been in a while, probably since 2007. But the reality is the recruiting rankings in the class of 2024, Michigan is putting together their best class in a while, which is what should happen on the back of back-to-back playoff appearances. You should be starting to gain some momentum there. They've done a really good job in the transfer portal. So I think that, you are looking for players in the portal that fit your culture and that you can come in and start right away. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, I think Michigan's defense is pretty awesome. I enjoy watching their defense play. They fly around and they're aggressive, and they let their defensive backs kind of go and do defensive back things. And I appreciate that. I don't think that people should be so quick to forget that they gave up like 60 points to TCU in the playoff. However, I mean, that seemed like
that happened.
That seemed like a lot. And I do think that they I mean, this is what the Big Ten's supposed to be. It's always been the Big Two and the Little Eight, and then it was the Big Two and the Little 10, and now it's the Big Two and the and the medium-sized 1, and then the small 11. So however you get there, I can get on board with all that. I mean, the reality is Michigan is the premier program in the Big Ten today, as far as on the field. So they have proven it the last couple of years. I don't think you can argue it. I think you can look at the infrastructure and the totality of the programs and all the other things that go around and still say that Ohio State might be ahead of them, but Michigan is certainly closing the gap. And that comes from being confident and winning games.
It also depends on how large your sample size is, right? I mean, they are the two-time defending Big Ten champions, but if you're zooming out and doing a decade, you wouldn't make any case that Michigan is the premier program in the league. But I mean, they're the two best and they're the two most important, as you can see by the way all the broadcasters are shuffling around the games to get them on their air. Here, this is not Northwestern, Burn.
Oh yeah, just pick one and let me guess who it is.
Okay.
That'll be fun.
Well, you'll know who it is immediately is the problem. All right, I'll do a random one. How about that? Because I was gonna do Penn State, but the very first thing is about Drew Aller, giving them the opportunity to beat both Ohio State and Michigan.
A little bit of pressure for a guy who hasn't started the game, but yeah. This narrows it down in half, but it's still pretty good. The last West team culture standing, although it's probably the one that's needed the most change schematically and maybe culturally. There's no way any coach, football coach said this, but that was the first part. I'll say it again. The last West team culture standing, although it's probably the one that's needed the most change schematically and maybe culturally. So they kept their culture, but they need some culture change. Anyway, we're all anxious to see how they address those contract stipulations on the offensive coordinator and what they can actually get done. They portaled out a lot of their best offensive players, which is a really scary situation when you're that bad to begin with. And it puts a stupid amount of pressure on the transfer quarterback to make something happen. Yeah. What is the number? What's their goal? 325 points? Is that it? Is it like
25 points per game?
25 points a game, or you fire your son. Like, that is awesome.
It's Game of Thrones, baby.
I honestly think every team should come up with some sort of barometer that is equally strict. Like, if Ryan Day can't get to 40 points a game, like, he has to chop off a finger, just like pick an appendage and just chop it off. Obviously
Mike Vrabel picked one for a Super Bowl.
I mean, Cade McNamara going to Iowa and Eric All going to Iowa. You got good players coming in. I don't know how you make a fundamental change to your offense without fundamentally changing the people in charge of it. And they still are seriously lacking just from a talent perspective on offense. And they lost, the best player they had on offense was tight end who's drafted. And then you lose a couple defensive guys in the first round. And I don't know, man. I think that, we talked a lot last season about like that 7-year window for coaches and how maybe that's the time when you have to either shuffle off that specific campus's mortal coil or like completely adapt what you're doing. And I don't think Kirk Ferentz is willing to do either.
I mean, he's into like his 4th 7-year window, right? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's wild. And I think the reality is if you go out this year and you're Iowa, and even if you don't hit the 25 point per game number that you set, and you lose to Wisconsin and you lose to Nebraska with new head coaches that are, experienced guys who know how to get wins. You see what PJ Fleck's doing at Minnesota through smoke and mirrors, however he does it. I don't know. Illinois. It's
by mixing Sierra Mist and Diet Pepsi.
Well, that's the drink, the beverage of champions. What Brett Bielema has done at Illinois and just the toughness that they have, like, I don't know how Iowa holds on to Kirk Ferentz if they go out and lose 7 games this year. Like, I think that it's time to move on because it's just what I'm talking about with Ryan Day and the ability to like be the coach into the future. I just don't know that a guy like Kirk Ferentz, as experienced as he is, as long as he's been there, is he willing to adapt to what has to happen in college football and all these changes? And I just don't see that.
Yeah, I think you know what the answer is to that. Do you want to know what they said about Jimmy Franks?
I mean, I do. I'm sure they probably said he's like the best coach that hasn't won a national championship or some other weird thing.
That's usually what they say most off seasons. They didn't say it this.
Oh, but these are anonymous coaches in the Big Ten, so this will probably have some barbs.
It's really all about Drew Aller. If he's as good as everyone thinks, this is their window to get past Michigan and Ohio State. He's the difference between another top-end season and the breakthrough they've wanted under Franklin. If they're weak somewhere, it's replacing Joey Porter and Jair Brown in the secondary because those guys are top-end NFL dudes. Manny Diaz is so good when you have something for him to work with, but you have to be curious how they're going to handle the hype and the pressure. Like, why is there so much hype is my question. Because they're losing such key pieces and starting over at quarterback. I know Aller's good, and that brings, another round of hype in itself because you have a 4 or 5 star quarterback coming in. I think that's going to be the one to push him over the top. But guess what? In years past, that didn't happen with Christian Hackenberg and James Franklin.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that they don't have some of the weapons they've had on the outside in the last few years, which has been where they've been able to compete with Ohio State. They've had really good players on the edges. You do have a nice backfield with Nick Singleton and Keytron Allen and now Aller, if Aller is able to be that guy. But it's a heavy weight, and he's going to have to go play Michigan State, Penn State. I'm sorry, he's going to have to play at Ohio State. It's not going to be an easy road, and I like Drew a lot, was glad to cover him in recruiting and think he's going to be a good player. But that sort of pressure for a kid heading into his first year as a college starter, not everyone's cut out for that. And I'm not sure that it's a fair expectation to put that on him. Now, I do agree and understand what they're saying is this is the window. If you have a 2-year starting window here for Aller, if he's as good as you think, and you get next year in 24, you have Ohio State potentially replacing another quarterback if Kyle McCord is what I think he can be and is a first-round pick next year. And J.J. McCarthy's gone from Michigan, and both those teams are replacing quarterbacks, and Ohio State's going to lose 25 guys to the NFL draft after this year. There is a chance I think you could see, especially the 24 Buckeyes will have to go into Happy Valley. That doesn't shape up to be a particularly optimistic window for Ohio State, in my opinion. But to think that matters long term, or that will somehow catapult them into the conversation where it's a yearly issue for Ohio State, I don't buy that. If Aller's as good as they think he is, he's only going to be there. He's only going to start 25 games.
I feel like that's the go-to for Penn State every single year. If Trace McSorley can do this, or if Sean Clifford takes the next step in year 7 with Penn State, oh boy, look out. They keep forcing this on Penn State quarterbacks. You're the only one that can do it, and you have to elevate it. And that's a lot to put on their shoulders. Where if you would just get some offensive linemen or teach them how to pass protect, maybe you'd have a different shot. Now you're all throwing on top of this that Manny Diaz is going to want to go crazy blitzing, and he doesn't have NFL corners back there to go try and defend Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. I don't know. Good luck to you. This does not, to me, feel like the version of Penn State that is ready to beat Ohio State again or get to the top of the Big Ten. I don't believe that.
They have maybe the best offensive lineman in the country returning, which is a big deal. That's certainly helpful for Drew Aller. I think that if you look at the offense that Mike Yurcich wants to run, and that he's been trying to run since he got to Penn State, you need a quarterback like Aller to really run it effectively. A guy just taking deep shot after deep shot, running those seams and doing those things. Maybe that's where you get some benefit from him as opposed to what you've had at quarterback in the last couple of years. Or, it seems like they've had the same quarterback basically playing with different numbers over the last 8 years. So if you get that just elevation out of Drew Aller, it doesn't have to be great. Then, but the reality is Penn State, if we had the new playoff system in place, they'd have been in the playoff the last 3 years. So it's not like they're that far away. And so I can understand why people consistently put it on the quarterback to change the game and elevate the game, because we watched at Ohio State. If once you get that quarterback to really be the next level, it changes everything. But again, it's an unfair expectation, I think, for a guy that is young, that hasn't really had an opportunity to prove what he can do, and isn't in a system that has been consistently developing these guys already. Whereas CJ Stroud came after Justin Fields, after Dwayne Haskins, et cetera. So you felt like, hey, you got confidence like Kyle McCord. Okay, we've seen what this offense can do with a guy running it. Is Drew Aller that much better than what they've had? I guess that's the question. And they certainly seem to think so from folks I talked to or that cover Penn State. But again, you're going to have to beat a very good Michigan team. That one's at Penn State, not a night out, not a whiteout game. They play Ohio State in Columbus. That's a lot of pressure for a kid coming home, like Drew coming back to play with Buckeyes for the first time in Ohio Stadium.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think bottom line, I'll put my name on this. This is not an anonymous quote. I think the Big Ten East is the best division in football, and I think that you can make a case for any one of these teams to be not just a playoff team, but a viable national championship contender if one or two things breaks the right way. If JJ McCarthy elevates his game and plays like he did against Ohio State, and they can win a national championship. If Kyle McCord plays like CJ Stroud, he can win a national championship. If Drew Aller is what they think, then Penn State can win the Big Ten, which is, their step on the road to a national championship. So I don't think any of it's altogether like unfathomable, but it does require every team to have, a spoiler alert, good quarterback play wins championships.
Ah, yes. You could put your name on that. It's also why it's crazy that the division alignment still exists right now, because only one of those teams can get to go to Indy, which is still not a deal breaker, as Ohio State was a reminder of last year, but still seems pretty dumb for crowning a conference champion if the second best team in your league doesn't even get to play for the trophy.
Yeah, it changes the dynamic of everything they do, though. I mean, and the league doesn't want to promote a team that's not in Indianapolis for the playoff, and you can tell they don't like it. It's not like they're not. Well, you saw a little bit of Kevin Warren saying, Ohio State belongs in the playoff last year, but he was already, I think, looking at the Bears job at that point, so he didn't care. I don't know. I feel like the bottom line, like the league is in really good shape. Ohio State's in really good shape. Michigan's in really good shape. Penn State's in really good shape, and I think that Maryland is getting better. They had a pretty good talented team last year. I don't know that they're going to be better this year than they were last year. I think they're going to take a step back, but
you've gone too far.
I think they'll take a step back. I said it. I've said it.
You
put my name on it.
You said they were in good shape. They still have Mike Locksley as their coach. So that's
give me the anonymous,
erroneous.
Give me the anonymous coach's words on Maryland.
No, we've done this long enough.
I want to know.
I closed it out. I thought we were done.
Oh boy.
I'll make something up. Yes.
Don't put your name on this. No, let's say we have to go to Maryland this year, right?
No, we did that last year.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Well, Mike Locksley probably knows where you live, so I would just probably just stop.
I'll see him in 6 weeks.
Wow. Is that a threat?
Yeah, Mike, come get me at the 50-yard line at Lucas Oil Stadium, whatever day that is, July 23rd.
That would be awesome. What if we can arrange for you and Mike Locksley in an Oklahoma drill?
I'm training for it right now
with Bill as the lead blocker.
I don't want a lead blocker.
Oh, damn. That's real.
One-on-one in the hole.
Who do you think Big Ten coaches would be the toughest to beat in an Oklahoma drill?
Did you forget who Wisconsin hired?
I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, obviously Luke was a pretty good player, but there's been other players.
He might let me win though.
Tuck coming. He's a big boy. Mel Tucker was a pretty good DB back in the day.
Brett's going to be a pretty big challenge. Luke has lost a lot of he's still strong, but he's not as intimidatingly large as he used to be. So maybe Bielema would be the toughest one.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see this happen. I don't know why the league doesn't allow this to occur. If we just got all the coaches together in some sort of celebrity deathmatch-esque event, or even like American Gladiator. Remember when they were on the platform and they had the big
joust,
the big Q-tips?
Yeah, the joust.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. That would make media day so much better if we got to watch the coaches beat the living snot out of each other with oversized Q-tips.
Yeah. Who says no?
Not me.
You could make, for both NIL collectives at Michigan and Ohio State, $10 million in the snap of a finger if you gave Jim Harbaugh and Ryan Day jousting Q-tips.
Oh my gosh. This would be great. I don't know why.
Let's get on the horn.
Yeah, we're open for conversation out there, Jim, Ryan. If you guys want to talk about it, we'll be more than happy to MC it. However you want to do it. I think this is almost impossible for it not to happen. Yeah,
we've gone from football to joust. I think that's all we ask for on the podcast daily. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you made it to this point. And if you did, thank you and salute. For Berm, I'm Austin. We'll be back again tomorrow. So we'll talk to you later.